Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Dean. Ms. Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you and the ranking member for this hearing today. Welcome, Secretary Blinken. Mrs. Herrera, I did want to also offer my heartfelt sympathy and the heartbreak of our nation on the loss of Marine Sergeant Nicole Gee. What a beautiful and powerful woman. We share your pride. I really thank the chairman for allowing you to express more information about what the State Department is doing, about my colleagues' concern about fentanyl and the illicit use of the precursors, as well as the transportation. As you point out, 95% of the fentanyl pouring into this country is coming through legal ports of entry. Sadly, many times in the hands or behind the wheel is an American. So I did want to let you know that we have recently begun a bipartisan fentanyl prevention caucus. Love to work with you and the State Department on it. Representative Issa of this committee, Representative Calvert, Joe Neguse, and I are co-chairing that important
Really welcome
committee.
that.
Thank you. I'd look forward to doing that. In the little time that I have, I wanted to quote what I read last night in your testimony and what you said again today. We meet at an inflection point. There is an intense competition underway to determine what comes next. The United States has a positive vision for the future, a world that is free, secure, open, and prosperous. And I thank you and the administration for that vision, for that mission. I wanted to say you also read, and remember this is about your budget request, and I want to root my questions in your budget request to be as effective as we can be. You say the budget will help us push back on advancing authoritarianism and democratic backsliding. Two areas of the world of conflict that I want to talk about, they're quite different, are Ukraine and Israel. In both cases, the United States is the indispensable nation. As I have visited Israel or nations near Ukraine, that is what everyone tells us. And it is not a haughty statement. It is a statement of truth. I'm proud of the administration for bringing together more than 50 nations for Ukraine. And my ambition, like I think so many others, is that we, this indispensable nation, bringing together a coalition, bring an end to this war as quickly as possible, that it not be a sustained war. So tell us about the State Department budget request and what can that budget request do? What can the diplomatic efforts do and are doing right now to make sure we bring a quick end to the war in Ukraine?
Thank you, Congressman. First, we didn't want this war. We did everything possible to try to prevent it. I engaged in intense diplomacy with my Russian counterpart, our Russian counterparts, so did other members of the administration. We tried to address concerns the Russians purportedly had about security, just as we insisted that they address ours. Unfortunately, it became apparent, and you don't have to take my word for it, President Putin says it directly, that this was never about concerns Russia had about its security coming from NATO or coming from Ukraine, of all things. It was always about Putin's belief that Ukraine is not an independent country, that it needs to be erased from the map and subsumed into Russia as part of a greater Russian empire. And that's exactly what he set out to do, and that's exactly what we've stopped. Ukraine's independence, its sovereignty, is clearly established. It's not going anywhere. Ukrainians are not going anywhere. But, of course, exactly where this settles and how it settles is usually important. And in my judgment, and in the judgment of the administration, we desperately want to see peace, although Ukrainians want it more than anyone. They're the ones who are subjected to this aggression every single day. But it needs to be a just and durable peace. And by just, I mean a peace that reflects the basic principles that underlie the international system and the United Nations Charter: territorial integrity, sovereignty, independence. And it needs to be durable in the sense that we don't want this to settle in a place where it's easy for Russia to just rest, refit, and then reattack 6 months, a year, 2 or 3 years later. So those elements are critical. If we saw any indication that Russia was ready and prepared for meaningful diplomacy to end its aggression, we would jump on it. Unfortunately, what we've seen to date is the absolute absence of that evidence.
Forgive me, because my time is so short, I do want to ask you about Israel, another country that suffers with its own security from without and the threat of its erasure, but it also is struggling internally. I want to echo the words of President Biden in a comment to the New York Times last month. The genius of American democracy and Israeli democracy is that they are both built on strong institutions, checks and balances, and an independent judiciary. As we know, there are troubling crises in Israel. What is it that the United States can do, and I know there was a conversation or conversations held yesterday, to push back against what's going on to undermine institutions and to undermine an independent judiciary there at the peril of Israeli citizens, both Jews and Arabs, both Israelis and Palestinians? What are we doing to move forward with a two-state solution? Is there any hope?
So first, we see the extraordinary vibrancy of Israel's democracy every single day as they have this debate about the future of their judiciary. And that's to Israel's credit. As Israel's closest friend and strongest supporter, we talk about these issues all the time. And as President Biden said, I think very aptly and very eloquently, for both of us, when we're looking at very significant reforms, I think we both found in our history that the best way to have a sustainable outcome that people support is to try to find consensus, and consensus usually requires compromise on all sides. So our hope is that that's what they'll do, but it's not for us to tell them what to do or how they should do it. They have a strong democratic system.
Generally, his time has expired, and I
And if I could
apologize.
follow up.
Mr. Secretary, we
happy to.
want to keep you on time.